Hello, my name is Richard Oakley in Law 2150, and this is my presentation on the federal minimum wage. What is a minimum wage? Merriam-Webster defines it as the lowest wage paid or permitted to be paid. More specifically, a wage fixed by a legal authority or by contract as the least that may be paid either to employed persons generally or to a particular category of employed persons. Now, why is minimum wage important? Well, the Fair Labor Standards Act, enacted in 1938, established minimum wage, overtime pay, record keeping, and youth employment standards of affecting employees in the private sector and in federal, state, and local governments. As of July 24, 2009, the federal minimum wage was set to $7.25. I know most of you are probably not far from the stereotypical broke college kid, and the minimum wage helps prevent us from being exploited in our low-paying jobs. This, however, can become a problem for people who receive no support and have children and require a more sustainable income. So why bring it up? As of 2015, 21 states and the District of Columbia decided to raise their state minimum wage. In President Obama's 2014 State of the Union address, he called on Congress to raise a federal minimum wage to $10.10 per hour. The trend shown in the graph shows how the power of the dollar has been eroding and the federal minimum wage has failed to keep up with it. In 1923, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled a minimum wage law for women violated the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment because it limited a citizen's right to freely contract labor. In 1918, the District of Columbia passed a law setting a minimum wage for women and children laborers. The law set up a board to investigate current wages, solicit input on ideal wage levels, and ultimately set minimum wages. These wages established by the board, however, were not met for the many women working at the time of the District of Columbia. And as a result, the Children's Hospital sued the board, aka Jesse C. Adkins and two other members of the board, from enforcing its regulations. The hospital believed its regulations violated liberty of contract as defined in Lochner v. New York. The case reached the Supreme Court appeal in 1923. Lochner v. New York held that minimum wage laws violate a citizen's right to freely contract work, and in the case of Adkins v. Children's Hospital, the previous ruling held up in Supreme Court. In 1937, however, West Coast Hotel v. Parrish overturned the ruling and held that states could impose minimum wage regulations on private employers without violating the Due Process Clause, as long as they are rational and fair. So why is this important to me or us? Well, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are about 3.6 million people who are at or below minimum wage. Now, many people might say things such as, oh, that's just our teenagers doing summer jobs or starter jobs, but that isn't necessarily the case. The Bureau of Statistics also states that 34% of minimum wage workers have some college or an associate's degree. 7% have a bachelor's degree or higher, 31% have finished high school, and the other 28% are high school dropouts. It's a scary number to see, knowing our college graduates take up the largest portion of our minimum wage workers. Based on a Wider Opportunities report from 2011, single workers need at least $30,000 a year to meet the required cost of living. With regards to single parents who have 2 children and for 2-income households, the yearly salaries needed to meet the necessary expenditures, including child care, rises to $58,000 and $68,000 respectively. Given that our U.S. minimum wage is currently at $7.25 per hour, working 40 hours a week for the entire year grosses about $15,000 annually, which is far below the amount that even single workers require for basic necessities or a good standard of living. When it comes to poverty, or simply just supplying the most basic necessities like food, water, and shelter, a study conducted at MIT shows that in North Carolina, for 1 adult and 1 child, bearing in mind that according to Census.gov, there are 10 million single mothers in the U.S. To live above the poverty line, you should make $7 per hour. With the minimum wage set as it is, you can see that that can be a major problem for the quality of life for very many people. So basically, the point I'm trying to make is that our federal minimum wage is not up to a fair standard. Hundreds of thousands go on strike for unfair wages, and people like me and people like my college students, companies like Walmart, however, are realizing how poor these situations can be and making a change. People in poverty usually are struck there, and it's time for the government to make a change. Thank you. Again, this is Richard Oakley on federal minimum wage and living wage.